One thing we know is on the president's 2018 wish list, a swift end to special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into potential collusion between anyone on Team Trump and Russia. In an interview at his Mar-a-Lago resort, the president told the New York Times that the Russia investigation is making the country look very bad, but said he does think Mueller is going to be fair. What impact does the continuing investigation have on the Trump presidency? Here for my pinch me moment of 2017, the veteran duo who led the reporting on the Watergate investigation, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. I appreciate it. Bob, let me start with you on the president's increasing attacks on the FBI. He's called the FBI tainted. He said its reputation is in tatters. He said that he has the absolute right to do whatever he wants to at the Justice Department. I know you've been working on a book on President Trump. What strikes you when you hear all of that?
I think that's a mistake. Clearly, now Trump is, at least for the moment, saying he expects to be treated fairly by Mueller. And, of course, the FBI on this case works for Mueller. If you go back to the Nixon case, it was a giant mistake for Nixon to have such animus toward the first Watergate special prosecutor and then fire him, Archibald Cox. And that got the whole impeachment case going. So, you know, Mueller's going to do this job. I think some of the Trump lawyers are fantasizing when they think it's going to be over quickly. There's no reason that the Mueller operation is going to close up. They're going to want to be thorough. Of course, as we all know, these investigations can be dangerous. They clearly want to get it closed down as fast as possible, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Carl, Bob mentioned the infamous Saturday Night Massacre when Archibald Cox, the special counsel, was fired in 1973. Do you trust that the administration is not going to do this? They assure that the president won't go that far, that he won't fire Bob Mueller. Do you believe it?
There's no reason to believe almost anything Donald Trump says, because what we know is that the President of the United States and his presidency is characterized above all else by the lying of the President of the United States. That doesn't mean that lying by the President is a crime. It does mean that we see him covering up events, but not necessarily criminally covering up events. And where this is going definitively, we don't know. But there are many times he has expressed, I'm told by people in the White House, the desire to fire Mueller, the desire to pardon people under investigation, including his family. And one of the things that's going on now is that his lawyers are telling him what he wants to hear. Yes. And that's what I'm told by lawyers in the White House. They're telling him what he wants to hear to keep him from acting precipitously and to go off and fire Mueller in a rage or fire Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, in a rage. They have an out-of-control client. The President of the United States, in their view, is out of control a good deal of the time, especially when it comes to this investigation.
And Bob, Carl mentioned covering up. I want you to listen to what Dianne Feinstein, who is the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, said about this investigation earlier this month.
I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice. I think we see this in the indictments, the 4 indictments and pleas that have just taken place, and some of the comments that are being made.
Bob, one of the main lessons from Watergate, I don't need to tell you, is it's the cover-up more than the crime generally. Is that what the president should be worried about?
You have to look at the crimes. I'm not sure Senator Feinstein is quite right. I think that it's possible this will lead to an obstruction of justice case, but we have not seen the evidence. And you talk to very experienced criminal lawyers and prosecutors in Washington, they will say what's public now is questionable, needs to be investigated, but it's not a slam dunk case or even the sort of case that you would bring against a sitting president to maybe to initiate some sort of impeachment investigation.
Well, on that point, Carl, the investigation has been going on for over a year, at least in the Justice Department, the FBI. We still don't know about any evidence that the president knowingly colluded with Russia. Does that give the president's claim that this is a witch hunt some credence?
He believes it's a witch hunt. There's no question he believes it's a witch hunt. And also, I think Dianne Feinstein, the senator, is ahead of her skis on this and is not quite well placed in her assessment of where this investigation is. Lying by the President of the United States, though this president does it almost reflexively, is not necessarily a crime. Lying to the press, which he does day in, day out, is bad for the country. It's indicative of the way he governs. We've never seen anything quite like a president who lies so routinely as this one. But it's not necessarily a crime.
Carl, briefly, I want to also get your perspective on the fact that one of the hallmarks of the Trump presidency has been to go after the press, calling us fake news and even worse. How does this compare to what you dealt with Richard Nixon? He was no fan or friend of the press.
Nixon in Watergate tried to make the conduct of the press the issue instead of the conduct of the president and the men around him. Donald Trump has gone even farther. He's tried to undermine the credibility of the press as a national institution to the detriment of the country by these broad attacks on the press, which really the press is in the United States, as our leaders have recognized going back to the days of the early republic, the last bastion of truth that makes democracy function. Yes, we make mistakes, and we need to admit our mistakes. We oughtn't to be too provocative, which we sometimes are with a president who's putting a lot of bait out there, and sometimes we take the bait and get a little petty. I'd like to see a lot less of criticizing on our air the president for playing golf. Let him play all the golf that he wants. I don't think that's our job. We've got a deadly serious inquiry in front of us, and the reporting by and large, by the mainstream press, by the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, has been some of the greatest reporting of the presidency that we have seen in the last 50, 60 years.
Amen, Carl.
That's so right. But if just real quickly, the tone is a big issue here.
I agree.
In lots of reporting, particularly on television commentary, there's a kind of self-righteousness and smugness and people kind of ridiculing the president. When we reported on Nixon, it was obviously a very different era, but we did not adopt a tone of ridicule. The tone was, what are the facts?
I have to, before we go, I have to ask about something that you informed me about, a Woodward and Bernstein bond that continues. Tell me about the Internet Sabbath.
Yes. Carl and
We're taking a break right now from it for a few minutes here.
but what we've done, Carl and I, are really friends and meet and talk and have dinner and get together with our wives, and we talked about the tyranny of the Internet. I'm writing a book on Trump. Carl is writing a book on his time at the Washington Star before he came to the Post, and we talked about this tyranny. So Carl will call me, say 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and say, we're going dark on the Internet for 4 hours, total Sabbath. We have to work on our books. And we do this, and the extraction from the madness of the Internet and emails makes you, I think in both of our cases, much more productive.